My new one is the Piper's Dojo. Whatever floats your boat.
Yeah, there you go.
No, that
And action.
Andrew.
Hey, Jim, good morning. Even though we just recorded an episode before this, we're pretending like it's a new day.
No one needs to know.
Yeah, I put on this sweatshirt for a costume change. I'm already feeling a little bit warm, though.
Yes. With the trying to get ahead for the summer events that will make it so that you're unavailable for recording and stuff like that. This sweater might actually be like seasonally appropriate by the time this episode goes out. But right now, you'll be sweating bullets for this episode.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it's all for the love of the craft.
That's right. Speaking of sweating bullets, though, I see your pipes sitting up there behind you.
You do?
Feel like which I can, maybe after I edit the aspect ratio and stuff,
This is why,
maybe it
by the
actually
way,
won't be visible.
I have to adjust my hat, but you can see why I wore the hat today.
Ah, yeah.
By the way, fun fact, those are my teaching pipes. So like when I'm teaching,
Oh, right, yeah.
I'll use those pipes. They're kind of set up to be, finagled with. Okay. Hat is adjusted. But yes, there they are there. Speaking of sweating bullets.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, which gets you sweating more quickly, wearing a fleece pullover in the middle of July or just touching your bagpipes for any amount of time?
Like by the end of one tune, no matter how easy I set my bagpipes up, bagpiping, it's like the sweat faucet. It just goes. Even in the winter.
Think about bagpiping too much.
In the wintertime, it's that weird fake winter sweat. It's very unpleasant feeling. Like you're sweating, but it's wintertime, and it's just it's the same when you do exercise in the winter. There's just something not right about it. And then in the summertime, yeah, it's just a faucet.
Mm-hmm.
Terrible.
So we're going to look at Finding Bagpipe Freedom, chapter 11 today. And you do say toward the beginning of the chapter that when writing the book, you'd been really looking forward to writing this chapter.
I know. And I'm really looking forward to talking about it on the podcast too.
Awesome. Well, and I really enjoyed reading it. And I enjoy anytime anything I'm reading gives me like ideas and excitement about things. And this chapter does that for sure.
It's so exciting. I mean, it's such an easy formula for improving your band, right? It's like you never quite know what to do. Like, oh man, I feel like the band's really kind of stagnating right now. Or like, I feel like we're lacking direction, or I'm not quite sure how to take this thing to the next level. I'm quite sure. Not sure. Like, I don't want it to be like it's easy, but I am quite confident that I could improve any band using the Bagpipe Freedom process. And not by a small amount, by a large amount. And it's just math. And it's kind of interesting and cool. It's super interesting and cool and exciting. And by the way, you could use it as a model to think about bands. And then you can see why the top bands are the top bands and why the bottom bands are the bottom bands. You can see it. It's right there. It's a really interesting model for like, aha, okay, cool. And then it's a really easy way to sort of spot the true. And again, I don't mean true like this is the true word of the Lord of Bagpipes or anything like that. But it's like you can see that there's a truth to the evolution of how you go from not good to great.
Yeah. Well, let's stay true to form here and open with the chapter's opening quotation.
Oh, yes, of course.
And that goes thusly: "Forget prizes. You're out to be the best you can be, and that's what you should aim for. Take care of that, and all your performances will improve."
By the way, I know who said this. Well, partially because I wrote the book, but also, it's Stuart Liddell, for sure.
The one, the only.
He really means it when he says that, by the way. And so do I. I really do.
But he wins so much. You win too, Andrew. So how can people who win...
Not as much.
Yeah, not as much as Stuart Liddell.
There are people who win more, by the way, for the record, there are people who win more often than Stuart Liddell. I mean, not that many.
Mm-hmm.
But no, Stuart really means it when he says that. And by the way, I think that at the end of the day, as competitive and like intense as they were, Jack and Terry and Reed always felt the same way as well. It's sort of hard-coded into the dojo method as well, that we play for our self-expression and not for accolades, right? For a variety of reasons. But they really mean that. And by the way, that's why I've been so happy playing in Inveraray and being a part of that band is because the band is about the music first, and then
Mm,
the prizes are a natural byproduct of that. So, hey, Stuart, good quote, man.
very good quote. I want to be just a little bit of,
You want
I'm
to hear a
not
horrifying? Do you want to hear a horrifying story?
always.
So last time I was at the major with Inveraray when I traveled over, Stuart quoted the podcast back to me. He's like,
Ah,
that thing that you said in the podcast about, and it was the thing that I said, I can't remember exactly how it went, but it was about the fact that if you're not the pipe major, you're basically just a leader that's not in charge. And he
right.
said he really liked
Yes.
that quote. But what's horrifying about that is it's possible Stuart Liddell is going to hear some of the stuff that we say.
Yeah.
I was like,
Let's,
oh,
we'll
I was
proceed
like,
carefully.
oh crap. Yeah, I actually don't
Some,
like that quote. I actually don't like that quote from Stuart that much, but I have to say that I do now that I know he might be listening.
right. We're gonna have a
Yeah.
little like a little Stuart Little, like buttering up in every single episode from now on,
Yeah.
just in case he's listening. Yeah.
Yeah, but by the way, I feel like a lot of people kind of listen, whether it's on the social clips that maybe they stumble across them, or maybe they've got us on their podcast player. But hey, Jim, hats off to you, buddy.
Well,
You
my
know,
hat was off to you to start with there,
and
Andrew.
behind the scenes, Camille late, by the way, she's
The
still
real
there.
magic is coming
She's the
from Camille.
co-author, by the way, co-author of Finding Bagpipe Freedom, but also she clips these episodes into nice little things, and people are out there. So, cheers,
Cheers, Camille. Ozzy Osbrod, the one and only.
the one and only. By the way, that's how I found Camille. Is from the Ozzy Osbourne.
Chanarant? Yeah.
Now, it was on the Chanarant, and she did those little segments. By the way, we're off topic here,
Right.
but you know
She
what?
like summarized them. Yeah.
But I thought, but they were edited really well, they were written really well, and they were recorded really well, and they were presented really well. And as a person who runs a business in the bagpipe world, by the way, I'm not going to talk about you next, but as a person who runs a business in the bagpipe world, if you see someone competent, you must immediately reach out to that person and ask if they'd be interested in partnering with you in some way. And
Snatch them up.
well, you at least you have to ask. By the way, it's the same is true. Like, we did the cruise journey north, which by the way, we're going to do an episode recapping that pretty soon.
Yeah,
We did that
got
with
it.
Jack,
Yeah.
but Jack's another perfect example. Like anytime, if you possibly have the opportunity to do something with Jack, you got to do it because, he's just a great business person and super reliable and stuff
Mm.
like that. But then that leads me to you, Jim. So once upon a time, you
Ah,
asked me to be
shucks.
on the Droning On podcast. And I was like, sure, why not? Sounds good. But then we had this cool podcast and you did a great job putting it together and hosting it and all this stuff. And then what did I do? I think
Snatch.
by the end of our recording session, I was like, Jim, please, you got to come on you got to help me revamp my podcast. And
You
so
got me blushing, Andrew.
that's sort of been, by the way, that's it. If you're wondering how the dojo became so great, which by the way, I don't think that many people wonder about. But if you were wondering, that's one of my key strategies is, find the people who are excited to do good stuff and see if they'll work with you.
That this doesn't actually seem all that far off from a conversation about finding freedom for your pipe band.
Oh,
It's actually totally segueable.
This is why we pay you the medium-sized bucks right here. Wow, what a segue. Incredible.
Thank you. That's it for me.
Yep. Okay, guys. Good session.
No, actually, I don't think the proper term for this is devil's advocate, but I do, because like I totally subscribe to this idea of like forgetting about the competition, focusing on your performance and everything else is going to be okay. I absolutely subscribe to that idea for sure. But it's also really easy to get excited about or interested in the competition, especially when you are competing, and so it's
competition's
like
awesome.
Yeah. And so I need constant reminders about this, or like there are times, even if only in my own head, that I think it makes sense to be like, here we go to compete, And so, and I don't mean anything against yourself or Stuart Liddell in pointing this out, because I do subscribe to this idea. I think it's solid. But in some ways, it can come across, it can feel a little bit like Like when maybe a famous actor, maybe someone who's been very financially successful and very popularity successful, like a famous actor maybe, says something like, "You don't need fame and fortune. That won't bring you happiness." And
Yes.
it does feel a little bit like, as a person who doesn't have fame or fortune, it feels kind of like easy for you to say,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so for Stuart Little to say, forget the prizes, it's like,
That's
okay,
oh man, it's so true.
but
And by the way, there's definitely some lying in there, isn't there?
mm.
You're right. You're totally right. Yeah.
I still think it's the right idea at the core of court. Like, I really do subscribe to that idea, but I do wonder, like,
It's like when
it feels that way sometimes for us normies, you know?
yeah, freaking like Wayne Gretzky is like, it's not whether you win or lose. It's how you
Right.
play the
Okay,
game.
Wayne.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
like, thanks,
exactly.
Wayne. Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks, buddy. So there's definitely a little bit of lying in there. However, the guideposts or one of the principles
Mm,
is that we're focused on the quality of the music first, and then we let the
mm,
accolades come after. And by the way, even if that is a little bit BS, it's also a little bit correct because when you do anything in life, it's pretty well established that we should be focused on the things that we can control, okay? And not waste a lot of time on the things that we can't control or shouldn't
mm.
control. So like, should we be controlling what the judges are going how the judges are going to rank the players? Like, no, that would be immoral. By the way, does it happen? Yes. But
Mm,
we want to not do that. We either can't do it or shouldn't.
mhm.
You know what I mean? You know how you play, Jim?
Yeah,
We've seen people play the game
absolutely, yeah.
before, haven't we? Where
Mhm.
it's like, huh, oh yes. And by the way, we've definitely accused people of playing the game a lot every time we lose, even though we're
Every
not in
time we
this.
lose, yeah.
Even though we're not in this for the accolades, there's also, yeah, we kind of are. And you're always like, oh, they only won because they're buddies with the judge, that
Yep,
kind of
there's
thing.
always those excuses, yeah.
Oh yeah, of course they won. Blah, blah, blah. So, but anyway, we're not in control of those things. And the thing
Mhm.
that we can control and the thing that we should focus on is our own personal best. And that's the guiding light. Okay. Even though there's a little bit of BS baked into there. And of course, we all love to win and we all hate to lose. Maybe we hate to lose more than we love to win.
Yeah, that can
I, I,
be
I don't really know
would you
for
call it
me
a negative
because
motivator? I don't know.
I don't know if which one is true for me, whether I hate losing more than I love winning, because frankly, as all my friends will let you know, I'm sort of the king of the second place. I feel like
The
I've
king of
had
second place, yeah.
yeah, I had a lot of second places, not that many firsts,
Hmm.
am I happy? Yeah, because it's not about the accolades.
Mhm. Now, have you ever,
I'm
um
straining, trying to sell that.
no,
Yeah,
I think it makes sense. I think it makes sense, and I think we're all gonna understand what you're getting at there for sure.
sure.
There's kind of a balancing act there for all of us.
Definitely. No, it's a balance, right? You got to
Yeah.
balance it, but then the balance needs to sort of like come down on the side of the things that you can control.
Yeah, keeping that locus of control internal, that's a better recipe for happiness than pinning it on things that you, like you say, either can't or both can't and shouldn't control.
Yep, exactly.
I I actually later on in this chapter, so we're kind of hopping ahead chronologically for this, but I feel like there's actually a really excellent example of this in a really like realistic application
Yep.
when talking about a youth band you were running, and I don't think it was RMM, it was another one.
And I wouldn't have been running it. I probably just would have been teaching it. But yeah,
Teaching,
Scotia
sure,
Glenville.
yeah, helping with. Yeah, and because the fairy tale version of this story would be something like, I did Bagpipe Freedom with these kids, and they took first at every competition and ended up
Yes.
in Glasgow or something like that, right?
Yes.
And this isn't a fairy tale version. This is a more realistic and therefore even more useful example,
Yes.
you know?
Yes.
Do you remember enough about it to
I
kind of
do.
give a recap of what was going on there?
Yeah. And I would say that it's probably an early experiment in some of the concepts of bagpipe freedom. So basically, I was teaching with Maureen Connor and her junior band, which then was called Scotia Glenville Pipe Band.
Yeah.
It's now called the Capital District Youth Pipe Band. But back then it was called Scotia Glenville. And I was in charge of the new crop of players and getting them out on the field in grade 5 competition.
Paint a
Uh,
picture for us. How new are these new players?
New and small. right? So like
Yeah.
new and very small between the ages of like 8 and 13. And there was one older player in there. She was maybe 13 or 14. But then most of them were just like very green, super green, and could barely, it could barely keep the pipes going, if at all. Okay.
Yeah, these are
So
the kids who are like as tall as their bass drone is long kind of situation.
yes, exactly. Okay. So the question there was, how the heck are we going to get these kids out on the field? And you have a couple of options. Number one, retreat. Don't take them out on the field this year. That's option number one. But then you kind of feel like, well, it'd be good to get them out there and get the experience and keep their excitement going and have stuff to look forward to. So we had to take what we're working with and simplify, basically. And that's exactly what we ended up doing. So we took all the embellishments out of the tunes. And by
But
we,
wait,
it was
you
mostly
say all the embellishments. You mean all the embellishments?
yes, that's what I mean. I mean
Like
all.
everything.
Yeah, so nowadays we would call it the simplified setting of the tune or the minimally viable setting of the tune is what we worked with the kids. And by we, I mean mostly me. Maureen was working with the higher level group that year, so it was mostly me. Simplified. G grace notes and maybe a couple of supporting grace notes here and there. And that's what we're going to play. And it was something along the lines of Robin Adair and High Road to Gairloch.
Mm.
I don't remember what the other tune would have been, but like simple tunes, completely simplified. Okay. And then over on the bagpipe side of things, we had everybody on maximum one drone. Now
Were there some with not even any drones?
I wouldn't be surprised, but I think most kids by the time we made it to our first competition were on one drone. So, and most of them would have been tenor drones or whatever. Okay. And then the older girl that I was talking about was a little bit further ahead. And so it was different for her. We had her on 2 or 3 drones and with some of the embellishments in. Yeah. But that's what we went with. That's what we went with. So there's 2 possible outcomes for this, or that you might be thinking that you're worried about. The worry number 1 is, I think that the judges are obviously going to know.
Yeah.
And they're going to penalize you and basically disqualify you from any competition. So there's no chance.
It's going to be a terrible experience for the kids if that happens.
Right. And then the other thing would be like, oh my God, is this the secret? They're going to go out and they're going to smash it and easily win the competition. And everyone's going to see the brilliance of the Bagpipe Freedom process and everyone's going to live happily ever after.
And like Bob Worrell is in the crowd, but he's not close enough yet to see the band and he hears them playing. He's like, I didn't know Field Marshal Montgomery was coming today.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So that's not what happened either. But as it turns out, it actually was kind of in the middle and then pointing upwards towards the sort of thing that you want. So the band did not win that often, but was in the prize list at, if not every contest they did with the exception of one. They were in the prize list. And I don't know if you've ever been to an EUSPBA grade 5 competition, they're pretty big contests usually. There's usually a bunch of bands in there. And we were in the prize list almost every time we went out. Now, the judges absolutely knew that these little adorable kids were only playing one drone each and could absolutely tell that there were almost no embellishments in the setting. Okay.
Yeah.
And because judges are pretty smart. That's why they're judges. However, the pros outweighed the cons for them, I think. Our finger work was pretty clear. We were able to blow fairly steady. And of course, things that helped were that, I was tuning up the band. So the tuning was as good as could reasonably be expected. Also, it definitely helps to be super cute.
Yeah, I can
No
imagine
doubt.
this was an adorable scene. A whole band
Yeah,
of
oh,
those
yeah,
little
yeah, yeah.
cuties. Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm sure all those things played into it, but it worked, is my point. We had brand new players that were able to take a couple of prizes in grade 5. Like, that's a pretty good experience. It couldn't have really turned out much better than that.
Yeah, what a great beginning for each of them. That's awesome.
Yep. And it's not too overwhelming for them. And they're not ingraining a whole bunch of bad habits by forcing all the drones and all the embellishments to be in, so you either have to wait longer before you're ready, which, by the way, when you're a kid, a year is a long time. So we don't want to wait another year before we go out and have some fun and compete. Okay, so that's not a great option, but it's also a terrible option to force all of the embellishments in and to force all
Yeah.
the drones on. That would also be a huge mistake, and you're likely to impart bad habits, right? Which would be
Th
the worst case scenario.
this is part of why I liked this story so much, and, I mentioned before this chapter got me feeling excited about ideas. This was one of the big ones because I don't know if you'd call this a paradigm shift, but I think in my own head, I would not have conceived of another option other than those two options. Either we have a miserable experience for these kids by forcing them to practice impossible hours to get to where they can play all three drones and every embellishment, and then we go out there and probably sound terrible and it's really negative in that. So that's a negative experience for the kids. Or we call it all off and don't even compete.
Yeah.
Also
Yep.
terrible for the kids. Like you say, it's a long time. And if they already knew that they were going to compete and then I tell them, well, we're not going to be ready, whether I tell them directly or not, I think the kids are smart. They're going to figure that out. They're going to feel like they're not good enough. Both bad options. And so to have this third option appear where I thought that was it, that's exciting to me. It's like it breaks this binary thing that was in my head and it doesn't just present me with this third option. It opens my mind to there might be a fourth option or a fifth or a sixth. There could be all kinds of options. And this feels like, dare I say it, freedom.
Yeah. Yep. Totally. And if you look at other things that have been really successful in the world, you see this. And you're seeing it more and more in piping too. It's not like, it's not like we're the diamond in the rough here. Okay. But you see it more and more in piping as well. By the way, I don't know if that was true 20 years ago when I started doing this stuff. So, I think it's maybe more recent. But you see it in other things. T-ball comes to mind. Right? Like to learn to play baseball, you can't, and you can, but it would be a disaster. So I'm going to say you can't start kids off on the full rules of baseball. It's not going to work. There's stealing and then there's trying to hit a ball out of midair and blah, blah, blah. There's all that stuff. So you simplify the game for kids and that gets you in the door. When you ride a bike, it's the same way. Training wheels are a simplification, which, by the way, maybe aren't ideal. Our kids learned on those little Strider bike things.
Oh, yeah.
But then you're learning what a bike is all about in a much simpler setup than riding a complete bike, right? Bagpiping has to be the same way, folks. So let's simplify the game that allows learning. And we're not just talking about kids here. We're talking about all learners. By the way, adults it's sort of well known. We don't learn as fast or as naturally as kids typically. Now, we could do an episode on whether that's actually true or maybe why that might be, but adults aren't necessarily super quick learners either. So let's simplify the game in the short run.
I'm glad you said that because I think that's the immediate doubt that comes into at least my mind. Maybe I'm the only one, but I encounter that story. I go, wow, that's awesome. How cool. But then I also kind of go, works great for kids.
Great for adults too. It works awesome for adults.
So, yeah.
It works awesome for adults, but adults typically refuse to indulge this idea.
Well, I can imagine there being a lot of resistance if I were to go to any pipe band and say, okay, look, we're going to do a reset and we'll see how we're doing by competition, but maybe by competition we'll still be in this situation. What we're doing right now is one drone for each person.
I'll prove it to you. I'll prove the logic of this to you.
Okay.
I'm going to give you option A, option B. Ready? Okay. So here's option A. Okay, that's option A. What'd you think about it?
I thought it was nice. Felt like I could sing along with it.
No, but also, but now you can tell the truth. It's like, oh, that's simplified and lame.
Way
and
simplified.
I would never actually do that. Actually, never.
Yeah, what are you, a baby?
Yeah, that's a little baby tune and it sucks and I hate it. Okay, cool. All right, that's option A. Now here comes option B. You ready? I'm going to do the same tempo. Okay. Which one do you prefer?
Yeah, that second one was, by the way, that was as nice.
It was, and then it was total crap, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The irony here is, here's the irony. The irony is no one will choose option A. No
if they're pipers.
No grown adult. Yeah.
Yeah.
No bagpiper chooses option A. What? What? And instead they choose option B. And by the way, that was a good version of option B. That was option B played by a, grade one, a member of the grade one bagpiping pipe band community. And I played it as, poorly, but it's still probably better than what most people are doing, right? So we do
You're
the
saying
hot
it could
mess
be more
version.
poor. Mm.
Oh yeah, it usually is. It's usually, from a fundamental objective standpoint, atrociously badly played. And this is what people choose. And then when those people go and they practice their pipes, that's what they're practicing. They're doing reps of that, right? Very bad. We should simplify the game. I think option A was very musical and nice. Could it be improved? Of course. I'm not saying it couldn't be. Would embellishments be nice to have? Of course. Just like after T-ball, we're going to start throwing pitches. And a little bit after that, we are going to integrate stealing bases because that makes the game better. Okay, but it's a really nice starting point.
Yeah.
We're going to simplify the game. Basketball, right? It's like we're going to lower the hoops. They're going to be raised up eventually. But for starters, we'll lower the hoops so we can get used to the basic ideas of the game. And then, soccer is the same. Religion is the same. You don't send, what do you do with little kids? You send them to Sunday school, right?
Oh, I see. Yeah. Like a simplified basic version of what's
Sunday
going on
school Sunday school is a simplified, kid friendly. And by the way, it's not about kids here. We're not talking about kids. We're talking about beginners, right? Sunday school is a beginner friendly, version of the real thing. By the way, I'm not a church going person, so I don't actually know him, but that's the basic idea, right?
Yeah. And I think probably what you're driving at here too is well, maybe this isn't what you're driving at, Andrew. Don't let me go trying to put words in your mouth. But what's occurring to me is, how do I get over my own ego what if I'm not even actually maybe I've been playing for years. I'm not exactly a beginner, but maybe I need this, How do I get over my own ego to back off and reset and be willing, and not just willing to suffer through this process, but to be excited about this process and realize it's going to yield benefits pretty quickly, actually.
Yeah. So it's a great question. And my recommendation is, as always, this is one of the reasons practice sessions must be short and intense. So yeah, we believe in this system, but in the real world, you can't play at half tempo, simplified in the real world and get much done. It's not going to be super fun in many instances to be doing this. So you do it for 10 or 15 minutes in your daily practice regime. And then in the remainder of the time, what we say at the dojo is, the remainder of the time, you can have dessert, right? So we eat our meat and potatoes and our healthy food, in a small, minimally viable, densely packed, short period of time. And then you can move on. It's very similar to what I do even today. It's like, okay, I got work I got to get done. And then I do the work. And then eventually it's like, well, this is something that I do for fun. So the work is now done. And now I will, throw the embellishments back in, get the tempos back up, have dessert, jam out. By the way, kind of realizing that, oh, yikes, my jamming out is not optimal. So, kind of gives you ideas what you might want to work on in the next high intensity practice session. But yeah, we can't do this all the time. We can't be rigidly dogmatic about simplifying things and only practicing in the pure way, but we want to do that a little bit. So how much can you do realistically in your day-to-day life? Let's take Scotland the Brave and let's simplify it down to the minimally viable setting and just work on the basic rhythm and the clean note changes. Yeah, do that for 5 to 10 minutes. That'll pay dividends gradually over time in the fully embellished setting that you play as well.
And so it's not, okay, I'm not allowed to play fully embellished tunes at all anymore until I master this. It's
Correct.
5 or 10 minutes and then go have fun.
Yes. It's acknowledging that we got to get better at the building blocks and devoting, let's say, a nice little decent, highly focused chunk of time to that on a regular basis. That's what we're looking for. And then the rest of bagpiping life, we're all pretty familiar with what that looks like, right? You go to band practice and The tempo's got to be up at band practice because otherwise the drummers have a hard time playing with us. And so that's the way it's going to be at band. So you're going to do the best that you can. Can you play simplified settings while you're playing in your pipe corps? You certainly can. Some of the stuff is more realistic to simplify than the others, but yeah, you certainly can. So it's something that it's a mindset that you want to integrate into your daily life. It's not an all or nothing thing.
Yeah. So you do say when you're mentioning in the book that you were excited to write this chapter. You say that part of the reason is because in your heart of hearts, you're a pipe band guy.
Yeah.
That you enjoy soloing, but like you're really excited about the bands. And I think that comes through. You're an appreciator of good band sound and great sets and stuff like that. And so this question that comes up,
pipe bands are just in my opinion, one man's opinion. Internet, feel free to disagree. But in my opinion, the pipe band is a more challenging, more musical environment than just playing solo.
Not to say that just playing solo isn't musical or isn't challenging. It is those things. Just pipe band is even more.
Like, it depends on what floats your boat, right? So some people are really, I think some soloists would argue that the refinement that you have to achieve as a soloist is probably higher than the refinement in playing that you have to achieve as a band player. And there might be something there, but that doesn't float my boat as much. I'd rather have slightly less refinement, but far greater creativity and far greater possibility, which in a high level pipe band you can get. Yeah.
I seem to really enjoy coming up with fake taglines for the dojo in these while we're talking, Andrew. And so my new one is the Piper's Dojo, whatever floats your boat.
Yeah, there you go.
No, but there's a relationship between the solo piper and being a good band member. I see you shaking your head there. And you do mention here in the chapter, you say, it doesn't really matter who the weakest link is in a band or who the strongest player is. What really matters is that each link improves a little bit day by day, consistently.
Yes.
It was, I think, when you were working with with RMM, I think that you talked. No, it was when you went back to Oran Moore. Maybe you can tell me. I'll just tell you what I'm getting at, and you can tell me when it was that it happened. But I know found that
you just made these notes last night. You had to do quick notes on this.
Quick notes, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But though I listened to the audio several times while mowing the lawn, so I have a lot of things floating around in my head,
Oh man.
But you mentioned that you found that as time went on, yes, it was when the band was trying to move from grade 2 to grade 1, and you found that the band sound improved in relationship with you spending more time working with individuals in the band.
Yes.
And less time working on the band, which seems counterintuitive initially to me. So what's up with that?
Well, it's exactly what you would think, right? So, and you just have to sit down and think about it and you realize that it's true. And one of the reasons that we operate our bands the way that we do is because it's easy. Sorry, but it's just true. It's actually far easier to just get people together as a group and sort of shout stuff at them. I'm being purposely dramatic. We get them together as a group and we just shout stuff at them. And, we talk about the breaks and we talk about the starts and the stops. But the real reason we're doing that is because it appears that we're doing good stuff without actually expending very much effort. It actually turns out to be pretty easy to do. And this is what we were doing in Oran Moore at the beginning was you were taking for granted that everyone in the room understood what you were talking about and could do it. And
that's
then
when you would say things like blow tone.
Yeah, like blow tone, you idiots. Yeah, like blow tone and, get the expression and swing that march and do the heavy left foot. And of course, the reality of the situation is the individuals aren't capable of doing that yet. So what do you do to get individuals capable of doing things that you need them to be able to do? Well, you got to work with them individually. And so once we sort of shifted gears to thinking about things that way, things really started to happen for us. You get together with an individual and you work on getting the individual ready to do the things that you want them to do. And we had a variety of techniques for doing that. But it really could be as simple as make sure all the individuals, in order to play in the band, are having individual playing sessions with the pipe major. That would be like the That would be the most obvious way of doing that. And there have been so many good bands that have become good because that's what they do.
What might the logistics of that look like? Like, during band practice, maybe a pipe sergeant steps up to run the circle and the pipe major steps out and takes an individual for 20 minutes or
Great question. And this is where the rubber hits the road, Jim, is that this kind of stuff does not happen during band practice.
It needs to happen outside of band practice.
Yep. So everyone is booking a weekly lesson with the pipe major outside of band practice. Might be. That's one way of doing it. That would be by the way, that would be a hugely successful way of doing it. And of course, I'm sure the objections must be popping into your mind immediately as I say that, which is, what pipe major's got time for that?
Yeah.
Right. And then, and by the way, the pipe major typically does have time for it if all of the individuals are paying for the lessons. It tends to kind of work out.
That make a big difference, of course, yeah.
And by the way, that is the way it works sometimes, but it's actually pretty rare that that's the way that it works, right? So pipe majors either got to have time for it, or you have to take that idea and get more clever about it. In Oranmore, we did a couple of things. Like in Oranmore, we had Zoom sessions back before Zoom was cool. We would have Zoom sessions with 3 or 4 players. 3 or 4 players would submit a recording of the material. And then myself, and then I had amazing deputies. I had Eric Olette and Keegan Sheehan, but when Oranmore was making its push in grade 1, those guys really understood what I was looking for. And so they were capable of running sessions. So instead of me having to teach every single individual, we did small groups, and I was able to delegate some of that to other people. So that's one of the things we would do. And then we would sometimes have long band practices where the beginning of the practice, we did what we called a meat grinder. I'm just trying to wake you up.
Do you want to describe the meat grinder, or should we just leave that, let people imagine what it might look like?
So a meat grinder was a way that we would clean the unison playing in the band. So it would be a practice chanter thing, and we would have very strict time limits. It would be something along the lines of 5 minutes per session. And if you have 20 people in your pipe corps, what's 20 times 5? It's like an hour and a half, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like these took a while. It took like an hour and a half, but what would happen is pipers would basically all line up and they would start at a station. And let's just say we were cleaning one of the MSRs. So station 1 would be play the march with Andrew, right? And then after you do that, then you go to the next station, which is play the Strathspey with Keegan. And then you'd play the reel with Eric Olette, right? And there would be 5-minute stations. And basically it would be like speed dating, but we would focus in on things we wanted to clean up. And then people would go through that meat grinder. It would take about 90 minutes. But what was really cool about that is you could really hear the results instantly. By the way, that was a grade 1 pipe corps. Yeah. So I'm not sure how useful a meat grinder would be in grade 5. Like, can you teach a 5-minute lesson in grade 5 and expect people to make adjustments like basically immediately and integrate them right away? Not sure. But that's just one of the techniques we use to get clever about getting people individual, giving them that individual attention to improve the playing.
That is clever, though. I think that's a very cool idea, and I can imagine it being adapted in a lot of situations. I mean, a lot of grade 5 bands are also smaller in numbers, and so it could be a 10-minute session and take about as much time, within the same space of time.
The other thing we would do when we rehearsed, and again, these are just ideas, okay? But the other thing we would do is we gave authority to our senior players. We set up buddy systems, right? So we had senior players in the pipe corps that had authority to give feedback to other players. So, there was me and Eric and Keegan, but we also had several other people who were in our system for a long time, understood how it's supposed to go and what it was supposed to sound like. So then during band practice, before I gave my feedback to the group, I allowed 30 seconds for the senior players to talk to their buddies about things they were hearing right next to them. That would be another way to give like more individualized feedback. Right? When you give big sweeping feedback to the group, it's very dangerous. And sometimes people, don't understand what you're talking about actually. And B, for some people, it doesn't apply to them, right? So if I say we need to hold the B in the third part of the tune, okay, if I say that, well, what if that person's already holding the B just about the right amount and they're actually doing it correctly, but now they hear they have to hold the B more. So maybe the people that were doing it incorrectly have fixed it, but now the people who were doing it correctly before have now broken it.
Yeah, you got a new problem at the other end.
Right,
now.
exactly. So now my wide sweeping feedback doesn't actually work. By the way, this is a huge problem in pipe band, even at the highest levels. Yeah. So it has to be, the feedback has to be individualized. The feedback has to be as individualized as reasonably possible, because wide sweeping feedback just doesn't work. Just doesn't. Because a lot of people are probably doing it just about right. And now we're making wide sweeping feedback that's targeted at really just a couple of people. And the rest of the people should continue carrying on the way they were doing things.
Yeah, I can imagine that could throw off those individuals playing as well, where like maybe they're in the pocket, but they're getting this feedback and they're back home practicing, being like, I guess I'm not blowing steady, or I got to hold that B longer, and they hold it to the point where it's not musical anymore. And then that affects their solo playing and all of that. Yeah.
Yep. In pipe bands, the pipe band craft is way, 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 way overrated. And the individual craft is way, way, way underrated in the way that we're thinking about it, right? So individuals, great bands are made of great individuals. It's really that simple, right?
Yeah.
And maybe you could put it like, excellent bands are made up of excellent individuals, and then great bands are, collections of excellent individual players that also have the really strong craft. But the pipe band craft is the final layer. It's not the only layer. And most of the time, the individuals are just not doing the right things individually, and that's the cause of the problems. That's the cause of 95% of the problems.
It's interesting that there's like a pattern that emerges here where it doesn't seem dissimilar from like what the Dojo used to have as like the tree of sound, or like
we didn't used to have it. We still have the tree of sound, Jim.
Oh, of course. We haven't torn up the tree of sound, of course.
It's an excellent model it's an excellent model for thinking of pipe band sound.
Yeah.
Or sorry, bagpipe sound, not just pipe band. Yeah.
And the freedom phases too, where it just feels like consistently the pattern that I see emerging here is we are going to the next step before we have got a solid foundation. Over and over again, we keep hopping ahead to what is the last layer. That last layer is not going to be nice unless we take care of what goes under it first.
It's so true. It's so true. Yeah.
To the point of like focusing on individuals being the way to improve the band, you ask a series of what if questions in this chapter. And those are, and
by the way,
if you want to,
these are just a small sample of the thought experiments that we could use to get to the bottom of and figure out solutions to our actual problems. So go ahead, Jim. What are they?
I'll bust them out, and you go ahead and pause me if you want to hypothetically answer any of them as we go along.
Yeah.
First of all, what if each and every one of your band members progressed through at least one freedom phase this year?
Oh my God, Jim. Could you imagine?
That got me thinking, because my pipe band, which I haven't been able to play with them very much lately because of my life, but my pipe band is about to hit its 10-year anniversary. And I thought, man, what if I had progressed through a phase every year for the last 10 years? Because I've been playing for a long time before that. But what if just in the last 10 years, where would I be right now? You know?
Yes. And that's just it, right? So it's like your band, and particularly your pipe corps, is going to get way better if everyone takes the current freedom phase that they're at and goes up one, right? So you might have people in your band that can't even pass phase one yet. Cool. So get them past phase one. And you might have people who, can't pass phase two yet. So get them into phase three. And if everybody just shifts up that one notch, puts a little bit of work in on those things, it's going to pay huge dividends for your group. It just is. We just know it to be true. And then if do that every year. And by the way, as the freedom phases get higher, it's more difficult to progress. But yeah, it's like that simple. It could be that simple to have your band experience a really meaningful improvement upward.
And then you also riff off that a little bit, like, and also what if it was 2 phases?
Ooh, yeah.
What if it was?
Certainly those early phases, if we've been playing bagpipes for a little while,
Yeah.
those first 2 phases, even the first 3 phases, it's possible to get through those pretty quickly. So
Mhm.
what if we got everybody in our pipe corps, like let's say you're in a grade 4 pipe band, for example. Like
Mhm.
everyone in that band should be capable of getting up into phase 4 with not too extreme an application of effort. So like, let's do that.
Yeah. And what
That
if?
sounds
What if
good.
you did that? What would happen?
Yeah. Like what if we kind of got ourselves to that, make sure everyone was at that standard before moving forward?
Right, make that our foundation that we're moving on from
Do
there.
that this off season, right? Do that this off season. It's like, hey, everybody, by March 1st, the new standard for the group is that you need to be into phase 4.
Mm. Then you pose the question, what if there was a minimum phase requirement to make it into your band?
Oh my God, Jim. And that would be, oh my God, that's just like the most amazing thing.
And you clarify here too that like a lot of bands have an auditioning process.
Yeah.
Even maybe they have a like a no audition lower level band, but they have an auditioning process for their higher level bands, or maybe it's the band entirely, etc. And you mentioned like it's hard to make that process objective and transparent.
Yep.
Use the phases. Just say if
That's
you
it.
pass this phase, you get in the band.
If you're willing, it's a fantastic way to just outsource the entire process.
Mm,
It's like, oh, hey, everyone's welcome in our band, but just so you know, in order to make the competition band, you need to be phase 4, a phase 4 player per the dojo system. And then if they're dojo members, they can do those phases and we can do it. We can do it on your behalf, right? I mean, we have our objective standards that we put people through. So you don't make it into phase 4 that easily.
mm.
But also you wouldn't have to do any work, right? Like, let's say pipe major doesn't have a ton of time, wants to improve the individual thing. I mean, that would be a great application of a basic dojo membership. I think you can still do the freedom phases in the basic membership.
It,
Yeah.
and you could also, yeah, I think you're right. But also
You
like
could
for the
also
pipe
do it by
major,
yourself. Yeah.
oh
You could
yeah,
also do it. I mean, you could also just do the freedom phases or whatever your version of the freedom phases is. Like maybe you want to make a couple tweaks because you know better.
yeah. But yeah,
I wrote the book.
do you know
I
better,
did write
right?
the book. I mean, like you should consider just, doing it the dojo way, but it's up to you. If you want to make a couple tweaks, go for it. And you could use the same logic to
Yeah.
do your own freedom phases. Yeah.
But sticking with the idea of kind of outsourcing this to the dojo, as it were, to free up time and energy for the pipe major, it also takes the social awkwardness off of band leadership. If
Oh, for
it's a
sure.
third party that is
Yes.
deciding, then there's
It's
not
a
going to be
fantastic
that
point.
social personal tension.
Yes. And if you do auditions or any of this kind of stuff for your band, it should always be blind.
Mm.
It should always be impersonal because a lot of times you got to deliver bad news and people need to know that it's not personal. Yeah.
Now, the next what if that you present is another one that broke my brain a little bit in a good way, kind of opened my mind to things I had never considered before. And that is,
Yep.
what if you had to earn the right to play embellishments in the band?
Oh, I love it. Yeah. I love that.
And you use the example, which came up in an episode a little while ago of Flet from Flauta being beautiful musically without the embellishments. And you pose a question for us, the readers. That question is, but Andrew, won't the band sound bad if some players are playing no embellishments while others are playing some embellishments and maybe still others are playing lots of embellishments? And your answer was, maybe. Do you want to follow up on that answer a little bit here in this context?
Yeah. I think it'd be a question of trade-offs, but also like, I get, like, I'm totally with you.
Yeah.
Like, what if we get to the competition season and none of us are playing embellishments yet? And it's like, that gives you a little sense of urgency, doesn't it? And also you don't want to be the last guy in your band to not play the embellishments, do you? So it's like, maybe this will fire people up a little bit. And maybe you could do it yearly with all the new material. Like, well, until you've passed phase 4, let's say, on your band material, don't play the embellishments, please. Yeah. And like, sure, we're not going to have embellishments. So that might sound bad, but the note changes will be clean and the timing will be good and the music will be solid and the grace note quality will be good. And so we won't have embellishments being played by a lot of the players, but all of the other elements would be great. Like, is that something you would trade? And the answer is, I don't think the answer is perfectly black and white, but it's food for thought.
Hmm.
Yeah. One of the things I think I would do if I had a pipe corps now at a reasonably high level, I think I would ask them to achieve bagpipe freedom for all of the competitive repertoire each year.
Hmm.
That would be the
I see.
project for
Yeah,
each.
apply it specifically to those tunes, those sets.
Yep, that would be the project for
Mm.
each band member. And you'd have to be clever about how you did that, but something like that would be really good. And then it would be really clear what the standard we were looking for all the players was.
Yeah, and that's important. So, and I'd imagine too that would help with the problem that can come up where, and I've fallen into this trap myself, where you feel kind of like if you proved yourself once, you're in forever. Where
Right.
it's like if it's more
Yeah.
like no, every season you've got to take the material seriously and take it through this
Yeah.
process. That would kind of
I
take
love
care
it.
of that.
Man, that's just a really good idea.
Now, when you talked about when you were instructing the cute little kid band and you talked about playing really simplified versions where everybody had just one drone going, etc., right? I can't imagine that being hard for grown-up players to be okay with. But I would like to point out too that in that story, they were, like you said, they got like third place pretty often.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for a lot of us, that would be awesome, And
That
so
would
it's
be.
like the resistance is like, oh, if I'm not playing all my drones and all my embellishments and stuff, I'm not going to get first. If I'm honest with myself, getting third would be great. So, and again, there's this balance of like, don't worry about the prizes, right? But if that's the resistance I'm experiencing internally, then maybe address it in this way. Be like, oh, it'd be
Yeah.
okay to get third, actually.
Yeah. Yep. And that's the thing, right? It's like individuals are what makes your pipe band great or not great. It's really that simple. And the freedom process is a great way to kind of work your way through things. Yep. And like you're outsourcing the really difficult, egotistically painful
Mm,
elements, you're outsourcing it, especially if you can figure out a way to evaluate these people anonymously. For
mm,
example, send me a recording of your playing but don't tell me who it's from.
mhm,
And then I'll just evaluate it and it'll either be at the standard or it won't. We've started doing that at the dojo for evaluating the higher level freedom phase submissions,
mm,
just to keep it like, super not personal. Because
mhm,
over time, you get to know the players' ins and outs, and you worry. It's like, man, I failed this person the last 15 times they've tried. Like maybe I'll go easy on them today, but you can't. Got to keep it
mm.
objective and real, and it'll be good. And then we can do this in our pipe bands as an ongoing way to ensure that people are doing the right things. I do have another thought,
Mhm.
which is that solo competing is a tempting one. So over the years in pipe bands, it's kind of like, hey, we want everyone to play solos
Yeah, that
because
seems to come up, yeah.
yeah. And by the way, that's not terrible because the idea there is if you're playing solos, you're improving as an individual, right? And then your improvement as an individual will help the band. And I like that. That makes sense. But there are some risks in there. Like, for example, you can play solos and be doing all the wrong things. It's very possible to do. Like, for example, I'm playing the material too fast with all the embellishments in, and I'm actually ingraining bad habits instead of good ones. And you could do that and even maybe take a prize every now and then in a lower level competition. So it's possible to play the solos and be doing all the wrong things. And so maybe you're not getting worse or something, but you're not really actually getting meaningfully better. The great thing about the freedom phase process, it's a different thing in that you're either achieving the good quality fundamentals that we're looking for or you're not. So yeah, applying it to your band, to your pipe corps would be really cool, I think. I don't know. Let's end it there. Hey, everybody. Andrew Douglas here from the Pipers Dojo, and I just want to say thanks so much for listening to today's iteration of the podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard here today, it would be super helpful to us and to a lot of bagpipers out there trying to find us. If you could give us a top-notch review on whatever platform you're using to listen to this podcast, particularly Apple, iTunes, and Spotify and things like that, your review would be really, really helpful. So if you have a moment today, definitely go over there and help us out. Other than that, until we meet again on the podcast or somewhere else, thanks again for listening.